it's better than my drive to my current job. So, right, yeah.
Yeah, I know, I think it'd be easy to get you in on this, 'cause I know me and you've been emailing back and forth.
Okay, so you're Mr. Rose.
Yes,
is
sir,
that-
yeah, we're about to
yeah.
start with introductions right
Okay.
now, but thank you for
Okay.
being here, but.
All right, thank you.
We already, I'm Mr. Rose, I'm the campus principal.
Okay.
As your district assistant principal.
Oh, okay.
Jason Richmond, assistant principal.
I'm Shabari. I'm one of the teachers on campus.
Okay, what do you teach?
I teach Brown Special Education.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yes, sir. So basically, we're gonna have a final interview, we're gonna
Okay.
round robin some questions for you.
All right.
Answer to the best of your ability, if time permits, we'll allow you to ask us some questions at the end.
Okay, all right.
All right,
Let me
the
get-
first one, because everybody has your resume in front of you, in front of them, right? I want you to give us a little bit about your educational background.
Okay.
How long you've been teaching, all those things.
Okay, would you like to, I have copies, I'm gonna.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, let me get this up here. Here, I have, can you share one? All right, yeah, so I have been teaching at an early college academy, it's an early college high school in Dallas ISD for 4 years. Prior to that, I taught for 20 years as a college professor, so I've seen it on both sides of the fence. I have a PhD in English, but my certification is in languages other than English. It's in early childhood through Spanish. So I can say that what I've done, I'm proud of what I've done at my current job. I love my current job, I love my principal, but it is a 75-minute drive both ways. And if I'm not mistaken, there are more than one Spanish teacher. Okay, so that's one of the things too, is that the only thing about the current job is I'm the only foreign language teacher and all the students have to take 2 years. So, but what I have done at my current job, because my attitude is wherever you put me, I'm gonna enrich as far as I can within what I have. You know, I wanna respect the limits, because you don't wanna start starting things that are gonna impinge on other people, but I enriched as much as I could. So I got there and they had me teaching Spanish 1 and 2, so I tried to set out to help by designing Spanish 3 so that the native Spanish speakers wouldn't be bounced so much into Spanish 1, because I'm sure you probably communicate with the Spanish teachers. This is a big hurdle sometimes. It's a disciplinary problem, because when you have half of the students that are already fluent and half that don't speak any Spanish, you know, it becomes a classroom management issue, which I can manage, but Spanish 3 has helped with that a certain amount. So I did that, and also, and that was, you know, several years in the making. You know, I really worked with the principal and I worked with the district to do that. And then I also developed the humanities program through Dallas College on our campus. So I was able to teach 2 sections. Next year they have me on the schedule to basically teach 40 high school students humanities in the fall and 40 in the spring. So that would allow me to take care of all of the sophomores, because we have really budget students. So that kind of is my background. You know, I have a lot of experience, because I've been teaching since 1998. But I always try to respond to the challenges that I have, you know, because when I made the transition from college to high school, I had to adjust. You know, now I'm not dealing with 20 and 21-year-olds, I was dealing with 14 and 15-year-olds, and so I feel proud of the fact that I've been able to do that, you know, without stumbling. So I don't know if that, you know.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when we talk about building relationships, I know there's a difference between the college and
Right.
those 14 and 15-year-olds. How do you build relationships with your students, coworkers, and parents in that?
Okay, well, I think that they're all a big group deal, right? You have to be invested in the community. So one of the things that I realized when I got to the high school was it is not, you can't come in and teach and then leave and then have no other contact with the student, with the people in the community, right? And this is, I had never had to do with parents. So the first time I had to call a parent about a child that was struggling, that was really hard, but now I've gotten used to that. I think the most important thing is I have to look at my role on campus as part of it is what's in the classroom and part of it's everything else. So I do invest a lot in extracurriculars, and that helps a lot, because one of the research findings is that when students are struggling, to enroll them in extracurricular activities actually helps them to get their grades up, because they have more contact with the teacher, they have more contact on campus, and they're more invested. So I started the Model United Nations. I took over the Hispanic Heritage Month, and I expanded that from just the show to a show and a fair. And then I did the Asian American Pacific Islander Month. We don't have any Asian students on campus, but it was still a big campus-wide celebration where we had all these different stations and they learned about all these different dances and foods. So I try to really branch out beyond the classroom. You do have to do a lot of that relationship building in the classroom, obviously. One of the things that my assistant principal advised me to do once, and I did it and it did work, was I did set aside certain days where I just said, okay, everyone, you're gonna be working independently and I'm gonna meet with everyone individually. And when she told me to do that, I said, I don't have time for that. That's 145 students. But she said, it'll save you time. And it did, because some of those students that in a classroom of 28 kids, you never get to connect to. If you make them come in and kind of do that and you just arm them personally, that helps a lot. With parents, I have not had problems with parents. Maybe like one parent that just kind of resisted a lot. But generally, I find with the population that I have, it's 50% African American and 50% Hispanic. Those are populations of parents that generally want their kids to be structured at school. They don't want to hear that they don't want to think that their kid is going to go and be acting like a fool on campus. So generally, when I communicate with the parents, they're always on my side. So that's one thing. I don't know what the demographics are like here, but I found that was the demographic that I have there, that generally they're parents who are on the teacher's side.
How did you deal with that reluctant parent?
Well, my principal told me to stop. She said stop going back and forth, because she was very upset about her daughter had spread gum all over the floor, and I had asked her to come and clean it up, and then she denied it, and it was one of those, she denied it, so it went back and forth, and the mother was saying that the student was telling the truth, and I just kept on giving her more and more and more evidence of why I knew that it was her, and so the principal was just like, you just have to let it go, just have a rule for the whole class that there's no chewing gum and just let it go, so I did that. So that's how I fixed that one. But that was a parent who, she really felt like her daughter was telling the truth. And it's always hard, when you have to tell a parent that their child is lying. It's always, so I never say it like that, but I just say, well, the evidence shows this. If you can show me anything else, that disproves it. So that's how I dealt with it. But yeah, I do meet a lot of the parents with the extracurricular activities too. They come in. I have a lot of students who were struggling and who were in all their classes, and then they joined the Model UN. They got to be part of the Security Council simulation and all these cultural events, and it helps in the classroom, because all of a sudden they are connected outside of just the academics.
Thank you.
So, the UN Club, would you be interested in starting something like that here?
I love wherever I can start the Model UN. I love the Model UN. What we did is I was trying to get involved in all the Model UNs in the region. Dallas ISD only had a middle school Model UN, so I just said, you know what, we're just going to have a Model UN competition. So the students on our campus, they were in groups of 3, and we simulated the Security Council. So we came up with a conflict, and then they all had a certain amount of time to negotiate with all the other countries to figure out a resolution of the contract. And then we had 3 judges who, they scored them based on a rubric. And it was a lot of fun. I wish I could give them a bigger prize than a gift card, but that's all I gave them. Yeah, I would love that. I think that is, with my African American students, one of the things that I found, and I went to a lot of conferences where this was discussed, I think that Black students have a tremendous curiosity of the world outside themselves. So it's good to give them a reflection of their culture, but they also want to know about the world outside, and I think sometimes that part has been lost in education. And Dallas ISD, I feel like that's part of the reason why they don't have the Model UN the way that some of the suburban high schools do. So I was really, I felt like that helped me to build a lot of relationships with the students by giving them a chance to learn about Israel and Gaza and Panama and Brazil and all these places, and they really took it and ran with it. So I'd love to do that.
I just want to go back about the relationship building. Who, in your opinion, who do you think is most responsible for the student's education? The parent, the student, or the educator?
I think the parent and the educator are, I'm going to say they're tied. I'm honestly gonna say that they're tied. I am not in the habit of saying it's the parents' problem at home, because they are with us. However, whether it's right or wrong, they're with us for a large part of the day. So I have to defer to parents, but I do always try to look at my role in it, you know, and the reality is that I do have a lot of students that there are issues at home, you know, and I do have to fill in that gap. I'm not a savior, so I can't, you know, find them a place to live or some, you know, things like that. But I think I do have to fill in that gap, if they're having difficulties at home. But I think that parents and educators are tied. The parents in my district, they're working very long hours. They're very stressed out. Most of them, there's only one parent at home. So, you know, I can't sit there and put everything on them, you know, because I'm paid to be their teacher.
Right.
And so I need to deliver for them. I don't know if that
You answered
makes
it.
sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
This position requires teamwork and commitment to students. What attributes do you possess that will help you succeed in this role? What examples can you provide from your previous job? And just to simplify, what is your passion for education? Why do you do what you do?
Oh, okay. Well, let me start with the first question. How do I build a team?
Yes.
Well, it starts with, I asked every single person who works in the building if they would be willing to give me their home address so I could send them Christmas cards. And some of them didn't want to, and that's okay. So I just sent them a little text message with a Christmas thing. But I think you have to reach out to people, and you can't, just because people don't say hello to you in the halls, there's many different reasons for that. So I think it all starts with creating an environment of peace with everyone, and trying to do that. And then I look for opportunities. So for instance, the art teacher, he and I had a lot of conversations where we had a lot of common interests. So we took students together to the museum at SMU, the Spanish Art Museum. And then I have the English teacher who her passion is for theater, and I've done the theater thing. So I worked with her for the Hispanic Heritage Month. We tried to put together some performance pieces for that. The other thing is, and then I was praised for the Model UN thing because over half of the teachers assisted in that event, and my principal, I was very proud because my principal said, she said, I don't think anyone else could have gotten half of the school to do anything, you know what I mean? But they all stayed after and they had a good time. So I think it's just finding, number one, reaching out, and number two, finding stuff to do with, you know, that you have in common. The chemistry teacher is someone who, like, maybe I wouldn't have anything in common with, but I went to her and I said, do you want me to teach them the periodic table in Spanish? And she said, yeah. So it became a big thing. They had to do the entire periodic table. And what, are you a chemistry teacher or? Oh, really? Yeah, so I try to do those cross-curricular things. My passion for teaching is, there's a selfish side of it, which is just that I feel very alive when I'm teaching. I really feel alive. I build off of the students' energy. And I know after almost 30 years, this is the field that I belong in, you know, because I couldn't be in an office without that constant thing. And I just love learning new things. You know, I always am adding on to whatever. But I do think that the cultural diversity part of it is a big part of it. I really like being able to open the doors to the student, to the rest of the world. So when I presented at the National Association of African American Studies, I really kind of presented that theory to them, that minority students, they don't just want to see a reflection of themselves, you know, they want a passport, and we shouldn't deny that to them. So that's one of my passions, is being able to show people the world, make them feel like they're a citizen of something bigger than what they know. And so I love that, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Luke.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so in class, give us examples of what data sources you use to make sure that learning is taking place, to be sure that students are.
Okay, well, the first thing is I do have several assessments every day. So I know that checks for understanding is a big thing in school. With my demographic, it's a little bit sensitive because I can't do cold calls. Because half of the students speak Spanish and half of them don't. And so the non-Spanish speakers are going to get very uncomfortable and embarrassed. So I start out every day with, they already have a predetermined set of vocabulary that they have to study for each class. And so when they come in, I give them several options for how they can show that they have learned that vocabulary list. They can do a Quizlet game, or they can take a traditional quiz where I give them 5 words and they have to, at random, or they can do another different Quizlet game. So I do that, and so within the first 15 or 20 minutes, I can see a sense of, do they have the vocabulary down, right? And then the next step is I take that vocabulary and I do an interpretive exercise. So I give them a passage where those vocabulary words appear, and I ask them to see if they can guess 5 other words that they weren't on the list, so they can build from it. Then at that point I can see, okay, how many of them are getting at that stage? And then I go to the next one, which is they have to create some kind of graphic or poster or something on that topic. So I try to do that, and if it's possible, then I try to get all that done so that I can show them 10 minutes of a movie at the end of class, just so that they can hear it spoken. But that's basically, I just try to get every day, I try to take the barometer, through those gradual assignments. And then the other thing is, I think that's the main one. That's the biggest source of data, just so that you know where they are in that class. And generally, my ACP scores are high. That's the standardized Spanish test. I think in the last year it was 95% passed the Spanish 2 and 98% passed the Spanish 1. So, yeah. Yeah.
You have a lot of experience. Coming here to to Edelman, I'm pretty sure you've looked up our demographics and know what we're dealing with. What difficulties do you anticipate teaching at this level and in Edelman?
At Everman. Well, I did look at the history of the school district, and I know that Everman was in the news a lot, like about 25 years ago. There was some kind of conflicts there. I think that it's probably somewhat similar to what I'm dealing with, just not as urban. In terms of that I'm a newcomer, and it's a community of people who are tight-knit. It would seem to me that a lot of them know each other. There's always the culture gap. I'm Hispanic. And then there's people who are not Hispanic, and so I don't want to be overconscious of that to the point where, I'm like doing things that are forced or that seem phony. But, I do have to kind of go gradually trying to just see the lay of the land, like, who are the people on campus, who are the teachers that a lot of the students seem to look to for mentorship, what works with them. But, I think that a lot of it is, I anticipate that a lot of the students here probably are dealing with a lot of things other than just what's at the school, and they're bringing that in the classroom. I have to de-escalate. I have to, I try not to refer. I try as hard as I can to not, try to get other people involved in the classroom. As much as I can, I deal with in the classroom. We had the cultural diversity piece is hard. In my advisory class, we had a huge problem with the Hispanic students using the N-word constantly. So that was something that I had to deal with in a gradual basis. I individually told them to stop, and they wouldn't stop. They kept on claiming that the other students didn't care, and I said they do care. They've told me privately that they do care. So then I asked the counselor for help. At that point, she came in and talked to them, and that still didn't work. So one of the other teachers suggested we have an assembly, and we talked about it, as a group, and then it did stop. It stopped at the point where they could see that it's not just me, that it's a larger institution. So I think a lot of the problems, I try not to refer, but it's always also important for them to see that my rules and what I'm giving them is the school's position. It's not just me, and that can be hard if you're an outsider to the district, because people are thinking, oh, you're just making up rules, so I try to figure out what is the procedure and then always reinforce that, if that makes sense. Yeah, but I mean, what are some of the problems that you would anticipate that I read that?
Well, I was in Everman for 12 years, left, I was at the elementary and middle school level.
Yeah.
But coming here to the high school,
Yeah.
I would never go back to middle,
Okay.
and elementary. And from what I was told, that it's been a great cleanup
Yeah,
of some of the things that they've had issues with.
okay.
And I don't really see it. You know, you have your students that curse, you know,
Yeah.
that's disrespectful,
Yeah.
you know, you have the vaping and things like that. But for the most part
Yeah.
here at Everman High School,
Yeah,
you know, they pretty much got a lot of things under control.
yeah,
As
yeah,
far as they're
yeah.
concerned, with a lot of expectations, rules, and procedures,
yeah, yeah.
in place, so I appreciate that. So a lot of the
Yeah.
things that was here in the past
Mm-hmm,
has been corrected,
Yeah.
has been, you know, corrected, and I love that.
right, right,
Yes.
yeah.
So I don't anticipate,
Mhm.
you know, it gets even better, you know, as
Yeah.
we go throughout the, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
the years, but yes.
Yeah, I find that I don't, I mean, even when I got sick, cause when I first started at Dallas ISD, you know, people were like, you're insane. Why would you throw yourself into Dallas? They would always say with this pause between each letter, Dallas, ISD. You know, and it's just not that bad. It's really not that serious. You know, and you know, when you first get there, it's hard because you're not used to like the fights. That was something that, you know, I had not been around because I had been a college professor. I had not been around. I never had to break up a fight. So the first time I had to break up a fight in my classroom, you know, you do it once and then you kind of figure out how to do it, and then you realize that the kids fight and then they're friends the next day. So why am I gonna get all in a panic, you know, when, you know, with a little help, they'll probably work it out. So it's just a matter of being used to it and adjusting downward. But yeah, I mean, like, so I remember there were two girls, I had to split them up, and they were friends like the next, you know, a week later. They were like all best friends. So, you know, you just adapt, I guess. So.
How do you connect with those students that you see that lack motivation, that's having issues with their attendance,
Mhm.
coming to class, skipping,
Mhm.
constantly tardy? How do you work with those students, try to get them to buy in to do what's right?
It's hard. I think one of the things is you have to try to get time to talk to them alone in a non-pressurized environment. I think that if it seems like it's a really entrenched problem, I do call the parents, and I try to have a meeting with the parents and the student. I just have to get to know them as a person. And I remember one of the things I read as I was making the transition from college to high school, I forgot which author said this, they said, every day has to be a new day. And that was hard for me because that wasn't my personality. My personality is if you drag me for filth today, tomorrow I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna be like, until you apologize to me, I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? But then I realized you can't do that with kids. You have to come in the next day and be like, it never happened, everything's totally fine, you know, so that at least you give them a chance. And then over time, you figure out what's going on, you know, why are you, for instance, the falling asleep, you know, I know I'm exciting, I know I'm dynamic, so I know there's gotta be something going on. I mean, I try to find out, is there a way I can engage, so I sometimes ask them directly. But then other times I'm like, you know, how come you're not sleeping? You know, what's going on? What's the situation at home? I think that's the main way that I connect, and I always do try to, as much as possible, have ways for them to be focused on work that is interesting to them. You know, because if you have a student who's already lacking motivation, it doesn't help to then on top of it make them do a lot of busy work that is not interesting. So I try to do the most I can.
All right, thank you for that.
Sorry, you got another question?
Go ahead.
Okay. What classroom management techniques do you utilize, and how do you address misbehaving students?
Okay, so I've had to really work on that. I've had to really come up with some techniques because I am not an aggressive person. So just by nature, I'm not aggressive. I don't like raising my voice. So generally, when there are students who are misbehaving, I try to diffuse the situation. I try to make sure that I don't correct them in front of their peers, because I've found that that is an immediate escalation. As a male, I try not to be really aggressive in the classroom, because that that's received very poorly, especially by the female students. So generally, I try to be flexible and adaptive with my agenda for the day. And if there's a really problem student, I just try to gently maybe have them sit somewhere else. I assign group work, and I kind of suddenly move them over somewhere else and have the other people doing something so I can go over and talk to them. But I try to make those discussions discreet. I try to make it non-threatening. And like I said, I don't like to refer. And so I try to give them as many chances as possible. I do have a group of students who they're always talking really loud and off track. So I tried this. I don't know if I'm gonna try it again. But I said, okay, you guys, how are you doing on the thing? And of course they hadn't done anything. So I said, all right, you guys are gonna teach the class for 5 minutes. So just get ready. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're gonna teach. You're gonna, coach the class with this worksheet. And they did. They got up. They were really uncomfortable. I hated doing that to them, but they stopped. I mean, they didn't. They did. So I mean, my thing is like, what works, I'm gonna stick with, as long as I'm not violating any policy. If it works, it works. And that was a good thing, because I feel like, on top of it, they did learn the material by having to sit in front of them. I have had some students who are just really, really aggressive. They obviously have something going on that I would need to pull into counselor, if it's violence or they're expressing self-harm or things like that. Then I have to reach out. I can't deal with that on my own. But generally, I find that de-escalation and subtle cues helps a lot. So,
Do you have any questions for us?
Well, so are most of the population that comes here, are they would you describe them, this is the surrounding area around here? So it's a pretty wide open spaces here. It seems like a kind of peaceful community. There's, cause I'm used to going in and Dallas is so concentrated. Yeah. What are some of the activities that you feel like someone could add to if they came here?
Well, I'm gonna go back to the first part.
Yeah.
Demographically, we're about 66% Hispanic, about 33% African American. We have about 450 or so EB students. So big population of Spanish speakers and that kind of thing that happens. We're 96% economically disadvantaged, so we do have those Title I behaviors. Apartments across the street, apartments behind us, apartments that are very transient. So the apartments across the street are Fort Worth, and so we get a lot of people who are not necessarily from here.
Okay.
They get vouchers and things like that, live here, and then come to this school, so they're not necessarily from Everman. So we get some of those behaviors, and so that's kind of what we get. So I know it is really peaceful. We put gates up around, because skipping, just like any high school, has been an issue because of the apathy. So that's been some of those things. So we want somebody who can come in and build relationships with our kids. We want a high level of empathy, but a high level of expectation.
Right.
I understand where you come from. I understand you didn't sleep last night. You didn't get to eat. Here goes some snacks.
Yeah.
I can give you a 5-minute break real quick. Go wash your face off. Go do this. Come back.
Right.
When you get back, we have to get this done because you're gonna need this later in life, and that's what we need them to keep pushing the kids to grow. So that's who we're looking for. So we want the people we hire to match our energy. All of us empathize with our kids, but we also are on them and have high expectations.
Yeah.
We don't get aggressive with them. We love on them. We tell them, but you're gonna do it because that's the expectation. Now, if you choose to do something different, these are your consequences. So we give them choices, and that's how we kind of cleaned up some things. Hey, if you don't want to go to school here, you're not gonna like it here because mama, you come up to get them every day. Every time they do, you come back. They're not gonna be able to stay here.
Right.
And so we set the tone with that, and that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
So we need that kind of person here who has that empathy with that high expectation. And that's why he high-fived you on that cross-curricular. We want somebody who's working with each other. We're all doing the same thing and building together. We want family. That's one thing, and you can see out here, we're a big family in Everman. Like, all the schools work together. We're one Horse Town. The high school, we make up 60% of the accountability for the district. Like, with the show, and so
Yeah.
people are all united. around it.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed when I walked in, and the person who greeted me at the door was the superintendent. I'm like, I've never seen that anywhere at a job fair. I was like, you're the I was kind of taken aback. I was like, you're the superintendent? And she said, yeah. So, I mean, that's it's very attractive as a district, the fact that it is kind of more close-knit. And I remember once I sent an email to the superintendent, and everyone told me, no, I don't even ever do that. And so, it's nice to be in a district where it's kind of, small and more, yeah.
Now, that concludes, you want to limit